there yet, you can go up, get one, and you'll be able to revisit all the content from not only this VTUG, but all the previous VTUGs, going back, I think, what, 4 years, John? 3-4 years? So thank you guys for coming today. I'm glad they have such a big room, and I'm glad all of you guys took an hour of your day, and I hope you guys get something out of this. My goal is, as a presenter on this lab, this breakout, is to make sure that when you go home, you do exactly what I did to put together a budgetary home lab and actually make it work. So you may not be a network master, you may not be a master of SAN storage, but you'll be able to put all these components together because I'm going to lead you through it. And basically, for $2,000, you'll be able to run 4 hypervisors at the same time and run VMs inside of those nested hypervisors. And we'll show you how that stuff gets built and the components I used and the parts list that I used to make all of this stuff happen and get put together. And really, when we start going through it, we got to do a couple of things as we're building out a home lab that I think are important. As you go through, I don't want you guys writing stuff down today. Next, you'll see my YouTube channel on the next page. Write that down, because this presentation, all the parts lists, everything we're going to be talking about is detailed out as a series of 5 YouTube videos that show you not only this presentation, but all the components and how I did the actual configuration of each and every component throughout. Wanted to make sure that we had networking out there that we could use that would do what you would see in the real world, VLAN support and all that. We wanted to not impact our home network either. You'll see a little bit about that. I wanted you to use iSCSI and NFS. I would love to include fiber channel, but not on a $2,000 budget. Sorry, it's not going to happen. How we put the software on it. ESXi has been free for many years. So basically, you take the free version of the ESXi software, load it on there, and you'll be able to run all the other hypervisors that you want, including Hyper-V, Zen, any of the KVM stuff. And then you'll be able to still run VMs inside of that and practice HADR recovery for any of the hypervisor platforms you want. The last line, it's not a step-by-step, but even when you watch the video step-by-step. The presentation is not geared to be step-by-step. I can't fit all that content in 1 hour. So don't write things down. Take advantage of that YouTube channel. There's other ways to find the information. I published that YouTube channel and that playlist last night. It's an hour and 15 minutes of YouTube content, and I think you'll be really happy you spent the time and took a look at it there. So everybody's been downstairs and saw that we have this as a raffle item as well. So as you're going through and sitting in the session, you see all those little orange cards or yellow cards floating around? Please fill it out. I'm going to be collecting them afterwards, throwing them in a bag. After the 3 sessions, only the attendees who came to this session are going to be entered in to win the raffle, which is the home lab that we're talking about here. So it's everything. The switch, the storage, the PC, and the ILO equivalent. Up here is some of the sponsors that actually helped out. So Shuttle helped and joined the community, and they donated the PC that we're using. Synology, they brought in the iSCSI and SAN that we're using. They also introduced me to the folks at Western Digital, who provided, for the winner of this lab, there's 8 terabytes of storage in that. For the budget, the budget gives us 4 terabytes of storage to keep things under $2,000. At Microsoft, as some of you were here already, you heard Dan say Microsoft has given up a Microsoft data center license for the winner of this. Veeam and PhD Virtual are both given 1 year of backup and replication licenses for their top tier products. So those will all be given out to the winner. So that way, you have backups, you have data center, you can build a domain and not rebuild the infrastructure every week if you so you can at least focus on doing the fun stuff. So I got all those folks together and we made that possible. Parts list. I am not reading this. All right, so on the bottom, I'm lying, right? I said this is under $2,000. I have one luxury item. This Lantronix Spider KVM. Who here works with HP servers? All right, how about Dell's? All right, so if I say the word ILO and DRAC, we all know what we're talking about, right? Well, I like the same thing at my home network, and that's what that Lantronix Spider gives me. Now, we all have home networks and home labs. We can go and plug a keyboard and a mouse into it. Yeah, I'm spoiled. I like my ILO functionality. So that is the one item that I totally consider a luxury item, but I think it's pretty cool and worth having in my home lab. I don't have to get up, go into my server, and plug in a CD-ROM and media and do installs. I can fix it remotely, just like I can with all my enterprise-class servers. And for someone who's never worked with it, this is a great intro, because you know what the enterprise-class servers can be managed like. So If you take out that Lantronix, you can see I'm well under budget by what, $30, $40, somewhere there. The cool part is these are the unique part numbers. Search these on Newegg, Google, Internet, anywhere you see fit. You'll find the right part number. That's why I chose these ugly looking part numbers, because you'll be able to find them easily through any internet search. All of those part numbers are listed out underneath the YouTube videos supporting this online that you can watch when you get home. So that way you don't have to watch the video and then type out what it says on the screen. It's all listed underneath in the README section under the videos. So software, again, software is free eval software. ESXi, you can go out to that link. ESXi has been free for quite a while. You can't manage it with vCenter, but you can run ESXi free on any piece of hardware, no problem. You just can't manage it with the vCenter. That means no templates, no HA, no vMotion. It's okay, you just need a hypervisor to go ahead and be able to run more hypervisors. And you'll see how we're building that up in a few moments. Evaluation licenses, that's cool. Windows, Citrix, VMware. When you build up your lab, it's eval all the way, right? Because you're not going to run this for production. It's a lab. If you're running this longer than 60 days, you might not be using it as a lab. So I'm making an assumption that you're either going to have licensed software from your company or be rebuilding the environment quite often. So software is not really the hard part. Hard part's getting all the components and putting them together and making them work well so that way you don't have to have any problems or aggravations. My biggest aggravation is thinking that I got to buy all this stuff and hope that it all works together. So I've already done that. I've laid it all out. That part list works great together and makes it possible to do everything I'm talking about in today's session. So we got a managed HP switch, layer 2 and layer 3 networking. VLANs, I can do static routes. Not dynamic routing, that's the limitation. I got that switch for a couple $100. I'm just happy I can do VLANs and routing between them at the switch layer. Synology, I'll be able to go ahead and have iSCSI and NFS. And you'll see that we're going to go ahead and have different VLANs just like we would in a production world. I'm segregating out my iSCSI on one VLAN. I'll segregate my NFS onto a separate VLAN. I'll go ahead and I'll trunk all my VLANs. That way one cable going to the shuttle PC, which is running my VMware host. That's going to be able to pass not only the single VLAN that the management port's on, but all the VLANs that I want to use for all my VMs. So again, just like I would do it in a production environment in your office. Those are things I wanted to deliver when I'm building out this home lab. And here's that little Lantronix spider. If you notice, that's actually sitting on my home network. I do that on purpose because if I'm trying to fix this box and I accidentally screw up my networking configuration, it's great to have a KVM access over the network to go back and fix your mistakes from the local console rather than try to fight the box and run wires, and it makes life very easy to do. Otherwise, you plug the keyboard, mouse, and monitor back in at a later point in time and then figure it out. And that home network, everybody's got a home network, right? Anyone not have a home network? In this room? All right, that's good. All right. So the goal really isn't to tromp on that home network, right? We want to leave that home network alone. We got Xbox, media players, our TVs, our 15, tablets and phones and laptops floating around. That's busy enough. I'm going to stay off of that network in my lab. The only thing that's on there really is going to be the switch. The physical switch will be on there, and that Lantronix spider. And we're going to go through and talk about it. So building block, the way I built out the network. That's my home network, right? I'm using that 69 subnet, and I'm going to, even though every network guy out there will tell me VLAN 1 is used for management, I agree. I just made this really simple for folks to go ahead and consume it. It is not always going to be best practices. It's a lab environment. You'll learn best practices and learn how to fix all these things. I picked this config very specifically because even though it may not be best practices, it's very easy to configure. And as you go ahead and have this hardware around, you'll find the best practices and find out how to do that configuration correctly. So nobody should use VLAN 1, but that's going to be my home network. It just makes it very easy for me to plug in. Everyone's home network kind of looks like this, right? That's going to be the 69. Everybody's got either a .1 or a .254 as their default gateway at their house. I chose .1 in my home network. And I had to give the VLAN an IP address. Now, if you're not really comfortable with VLANs and subnets and doing that network config on a switch, don't worry about it, because when you look at the video on how I configure the switch, I'll walk you through step by step how I configure the networks. I'll relate back to this chart, and I'll show you the specific configuration parameters. All you have to do is worry about are the first 3 octets matching for your network. That's about it. So I'll walk you through the entirety of that on that YouTube video. That's about a 15 or 20 minute video that you'll be able to watch at home. And then what we're going to do is not only use that home network that we have there, we're going to build out all these other networks that have all these different functions, just like I would do for any of my clients, enterprise or small business that I have, because I want to go ahead and separate different types of traffic, so that way I can go ahead and learn VLANs, multiple port group configurations, pass that traffic around, do HA, do vMotion, do fault tolerant builds in my lab. That's really the goal. So you'll see that there's a difference there. Here I've got VLAN IDs of .254 for all of those other VLANs that I'm creating. You'll also see that that's going to be the default gateway. That's just a networking rule. Once I give that switch a default gateway for each of those different VLANs, that becomes the managed IP address. There's a lot of other guys who can explain it better in the networking space. You'll see how I've done the configuration in the actual video when you go home and watch that. And it'll work out of the gate like this. If you want to dive deeper into the network, not my skill set. I know a lot of people who are better teachers around networking than I. But this will help get you up and running with at least 8 different VLANs in that environment. The switch that we're talking about can support up to 32 VLANs. So pick the switch because it's cheap, silent, meaning there's no fans, and I can put it on my desk in my office and not be mad at it. It has a lot of the other advanced features. So once you get beyond just playing around with VLANs, QoS, authentication, integration into other Active Directories or LDAP structures to get users and permissions and set different levels of security on it, all those things exist. But the key things were cost, supporting VLANs, and the ability to add 32 static routes on the switch. I can afford that for a couple of $100. 8 ports, that's cool. Essentially, when you start looking at the video, this is the management screen. Any networking guys in here? Strictly networking folks? Good CLI guys? No? One? This switch does not have a CLI. It's, you can turn it on and get some basic things configured, but it's basically a GUI managed switch, web only. And you know, you can go through, you get some of the basic, the logon screen. You'll see here you've got some of that other configuration information, time, DNS, syslog, basic system maintenance configurations. You can get into the advanced authentication that I mentioned, the QoS, some of the security, and you'll probably spend most of your time configuring VLANs on that switch. So the video that accompanies this will walk you through the configuration of this and help you build out this setup for your environment when you take and buy the switch and set it up at home using this as a template with those network addresses that I had up on the table as the example. It'll actually walk you through that entire setup. It'll also walk you through setting up the .254 for all those different subnets, so that way you can route traffic in and out of all the different VLANs. So if you've never done it and you follow the instructions laid out here, it'll teach you how to do it. Once you get it working, be creative, play around with it. It's a lab. The goal is to make sure that you can learn something new out of this, and if you break it, no big deal. It's at your house, no big deal. Better than playing in production and making a mistake there, especially on a Friday afternoon. All right, and really, you'll end up configuring the ports. Access ports, the hybrid port means trunks, so I'm sending all those VLANs from 1 through 8 down the trunk, so I have multiple hypervisors that I'm capable of plugging in here. Makes it really easy to continue to add more and more compute power if you needed that in your lab and could afford it. $200 gets you really this package. That front cable, no one's going to use that. It's a grounding cable. For our home lab, we're probably not going to connect it to anything. You got rabbit ears, power plugs, the little rubber feet, and then you also got the switch, and the switch on top of that is a serial cable, because network gear is connected to a serial port. How many people here have a laptop with a serial port still? All right. How many people out there have a USB to serial adapter? All right, that's an awesome room. All right, so you guys know how to get the connection to this. All right, great. Who's still, hyperterminal or PuTTY? PuTTY. So Windows 7 for everybody, right? Yeah, there's no more hyperterm in Windows 7. I found that out when I went to go and set this up. So figured out PuTTY worked pretty well, pretty quick. Here's all the configuration steps to capture that and do the setup. Pretty straightforward. It's also in the video, in the text right below the video, so you don't have to write stuff down. It's all captured. And if you do everything the video says, you'll be able to hit the switch with the IP address, log in. It has all the default usernames, all the default passwords. Everything that you need to turn it on is captured in that video. So step-by-step instructions at that point. And literally the video that goes through, this is what you'll see. It'll walk you through the initial configuration of the serial port. It'll walk you through the connection, the boot process of the switch initially. And then it'll end up with the final connection to the web page and the setup of all those VLANs and everything else. And the reason, again, I capture this stuff as YouTube videos is because I know for a fact we can't cover all of this content in 1 hour. So please have some fun and look at this on your environment as you get the time. So one of the things that you're going to find out as you're going ahead and configuring your network, you're going to have ESX hosts, anything that's running in those VLANs that are being routed by the switch, including the iSCSI storage. You're going to be able to get to them from your desktop at some point, but you're not going to have you're not going to be able to get from the Synology to the internet or the shuttle PC and all the VLANs to the internet, because they have their default gateway. They know how to find your home router, but the home router doesn't know how to send information back to those networks. So I'm telling you that, I'm bringing that up now, and I'm also not telling you the answer. Why? You got to have some fun and learn this stuff on your own, right? So you're going to figure out that you're going to need to set up some static routes, and the only hint I'll give you is your static routes need to send their traffic to that IP address. So at least that'll give you an idea of how you can go ahead and get that working. I'll show you another way you can cheat and get your PC to talk to those subnets correctly when we get to the iSCSI part. All right, so we've got this switch configured now. Now we got our infrastructure ready to go. We're ready to start plugging in our other components. Going to talk about the Synology, iSCSI, and NFS storage. And that was one of the reasons I chose that. It actually has support for Microsoft Hyper-V and VMware ESXi. Has all the VAI drivers, but you have to buy a specific model that was in the parts list. It's a 412 Plus. There's a 412, and then there's a 412 Plus. 412 does not have support for VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V. 412 Plus does. And really, I mean, this thing is quiet too, so it's really easy to use. Western Digital went through and provided us some of these drives. So again, this is one of the things. I bring the partners together and I make them contribute to the community, and now they're even aware of us. So they're out there and they're interested in doing more support and more events. So there might be more kind of fun things to do, like this home lab setup as time goes on, and summer VTUG approaches. But essentially, minimum configuration, you need 2 drives in your Synology to make it work. And that's why I focused on that in the budget for building out the lab. So really, with this Synology, again, even though I've got some of the steps here that I'm using to do the basic configuration, as you go through and you look at the multiple videos that are supporting this out on the YouTube channel, you'll find that I have the entire Synology setup, from the initial power on, to the discovery of the device, to the configuration of disk pools, to the configuration of individual LUNs, to iSCSI presentation, and NFS presentation as well. All of that's covered in the entire content online. So you'll be able to go and at your leisure go ahead and follow that setup process and build this out yourself. And I mentioned that you're going to have problems getting to your desktop once you do the different instructions and you move the Synology out to its managed network. So when you move it to the managed network, how many people are comfortable doing route add? Everybody? All right. Just in case you weren't, it's right there, but just do a route add. Put in those new subnets on your home machine, and make sure you don't make it persistent. My goal is to make sure that I don't damage my home network or my home computers. So if I do a route add without making it persistent, all I do is reboot, and it cleans out my routing table. Yeah, that means I have to redo the route add command if I want to get to the equipment later, but it keeps it locked up and secure. Because how many people have children? All right, so I'm not even going to go into that. So we all know why we're going to do that and not leave that command open. And essentially that'll get us to the point where that Synology's up and running. We have the ability to create and present disks. We're going to have that switch up and running. We're going to be able to talk to stuff. We're going to go through, and the next one is really going to cover that luxury item. That Lantronix Spider, that item that I pointed out at the bottom, that puts me over budget, over the $2,000. It's my luxury item, but I love having this thing. This is that ILO or DRAC equivalent software. And that's what it looks like. A lot of you guys went downstairs and saw it on the back of the equipment. Really, you get a serial cable, you get a little mounting bracket, and you get the Lantronix Spider itself. Picture on the left shows one side of it. On the left, you got your link, and that link is how you connect an Ethernet cable to it, put it on your network. The cable to the right, you can actually take these spiders and you can daisy chain them. So you can have one switch port connected, and you can have like 10 spiders connected to that one cable. So you can save yourself some switch ports. And then the picture on the right is the other end of that Lantronix Spider. And that is a serial connection, because that's how you set up your initial static IP address on the Lantronix Spider. And the video I have, the instructional video, we'll go through the actual setup of that. You'll see I've got this information captured at that bottom of that video for how to set up the serial port, the usernames, the passwords, the exact content to go through and do the initial configuration against that. They pretty much ship today, up to date with firmware, but we all know we all update our firmware and everything every time firmware is released anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. So, and we all do it, right? Yeah. And so again, that's that capture, that video. We watch the boot sequence. We apply the IP address to that Lantronix Spider, get it up and running, and then I open up a web page and I can manage my lab box. And that leaves us with one last item here that we want to go ahead and set up and configure. And that would be that shuttle PC that's going to act as my ESXi server. So inside that shuttle PC, I've got 32 gigs of RAM. I've got an an i7 something processor. Pretty good. I forget at this point. I built this stuff in mid-December. I also have a single 500 gig drive, so I can at least load something on it, staying within budget, right? 500 gig drive was cheap. It was 40 or 60 bucks now. Yeah, it's ridiculous. No CD-ROM, and makes it easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to start building on this. That internal drive that's inside that shuttle, on that internal drive, I'm going to go ahead and install ESXi on that internal drive, because I'm going to have this hypervisor that's installed there. A few things to note about that. I personally think that if you're going to do this lab and you're going to go home and do this, just use 5.5 from VMware. But if you wanted to use some of the older versions, there are some additional things that you're going to want to do. One of the reasons you can't just use 5.5, even though I say to use it, the Realtek drivers are not part of the 5.5 general availability media. If you want to go ahead and put 5.5 on there and use the onboard adapter without making a custom ESX ISO, do an install of 5.1, and right away after that, just upgrade to 5.5 and the drivers will be there, and you don't have to learn to make a custom ISO right away. It'll at least get you that other NIC that's on board on the shuttle PC functioning right away. That took me a while to figure out. All right, so once we figure that out and we decide that we're going to load ESX on there, we're going to put the ESXi hypervisor on there. Again, go out when you download it from VMware. There's a specific download for it that allows you to, with your My VMware login, request a single license for it or multiple licenses for it. They'll give you all the free licenses you want for ESXi. You just can't manage those ESXi boxes with vCenter. That's the only gotcha. This is my home lab. That's totally cool. So, once you've got ESXi loaded up on the hardware, a couple of configuration changes that you used to have to do. I still put them on in case somebody wants to run older 5.0 or 5.5, I'm sorry, or 5.1, or even 3.5 or 4X. Someone. Couple of changes that you'll want to make on the virtual switches. I'll show you as you go through and you look at those configurations. And actually, I got the next slide will kind of bring up how I configured the virtual switches. Anybody ever seen that you can configure a trunk as a port group? So basically, it's just passing all VLANs down, just like switch-to-switch traffic. You have to do that if you want to run nested hypervisors and have those nested hypervisors use VLAN tags. Have to do that trunk port group. And Shuttle used to not be able to run virtual machines inside of virtual machines, but back in 2011, they put the Intel VT code in the BIOS of their motherboard, which now can take advantage of that feature in all the Intel chips, which is what I need as a feature to run virtual machines inside of virtual machines. Why do I do that? It's a great lab environment. It's easier to reset. Essentially, that's pretty much it. That slide kind of says, I'm going to make one virtual switch. I'm going to make a few different port groups, and then I'm going to go ahead and use a NIC, and I'm going to attach to my switch. Could I use both NICs in a team? Yeah, but I just figured one line was simpler to start with. So, and there's security. Who sets all their security in the tab for the virtual switches? Promiscuity, MAC address changes, those things. You have to have that configured a very specific way if you want to have the traffic from your virtualized hypervisors actually communicate with other things on your network. And I call out those settings that you need to configure right there. All right, cool. So we've got the basic ESXi environment running. We're still just inside the shuttle PC right now. Once you do that, you can build a VM. That VM that we're going to build is an ESXi server. Could it be Hyper-V? Absolutely, it can be Hyper-V or Zen or KVM, any of the hypervisor engines. So what's really cool about that is I'll be able to run more than one. Some of the things that you'll have to do to actually build that first virtualized hypervisor. When you do the build process, you can't choose ESXi. I don't know why, but you have to build it like this as a Red Hat Linux box first. How many people here have done this next step? Who's upgraded to 5.5 completely? A couple of people. Who's upgraded all of their 5.5 VMs to the version 10 of the hardware? One person. So the reason I asked that question, hopefully you'll remember it. Once you upgrade to the virtual hardware version 10, you have to use the web interface to edit the settings of a virtual machine. Just keep that in mind, because the only way to get a web client is to the Virtual Center. And the free version of ESXi doesn't really talk well with Virtual Center. Just kind of keep that in mind. So keep your hardware at version 8 or 9, and you'll be totally fine with this in your lab. But we're not done building that ESXi server. You'll still have to go through and do a few things. And actually, I think I skipped 2 slides. Yeah. There we go. Some additional settings. I just take out the floppy. I never use it, except for loading a Power Virtual driver in 2008. Once you build the VM, you can change a VM to be an ESXi server. Actually, if you guys don't know, VMware Labs is a place where they put new software. There is now VMware tools for ESXi servers. So they're helping to validate that this is actually a really good way to build out a lab. So you can actually put VMware tools inside a virtualized ESXi server, right-click, and have it shut down gracefully the right way. Cool. You'll have to go through and edit lines into the VMX file. One of them you can do through the GUI. One of them you cannot. Why can't I do it through the GUI? I haven't figured it out. I just figured out that you can't do it through the GUI. So this would be a good time to refresh your PuTTY skills, learn SSH, get back into the console, and edit that VNX file by hand. And that would be this VHV enable equals true. What those two things do is they allow operating systems that say, don't run VMs in a hypervisor that's been virtualized already. That abstracts that and makes it think it's running on real hardware, so you can run VMs inside of VMs. So a combination of those two things and this setting here that you would have to do inside of the advanced settings of the CPU. I know it looks cryptic. Again, guess what? This stuff is all written down for you in the notes below the videos that explain all of these steps, so you don't have to worry about writing it all down here today, all right? This abstracts something from the CPU, and again, I don't remember the details about it. I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years, so I forget why I do this, but I know I still have to. And that's the last step that enables, these are the last steps that enable you to run a VM. So I talked about how to build this out as an ESXi server. The difference between building an ESXi server to run virtualization and to build a Hyper-V host to run virtualization, when you create a Hyper-V host, you just build it as a Windows 2012. All those other modifications still have to be done. That's about the only difference, is what the guest OS type is. So once you have that, you can fire up many, many VMs. So this hardware that we're talking about, that 32 gig shuttle PC, you can run 4 ESXi servers on that hardware at any one point in time. 8 gigs a piece. I know that's not a lot, but it's a lab. And you know what? If you want to run 2 and run 16 gigs each, you can do that too. You got a lot of resources here to play with. So once you have those VMs configured, there's lots of ways you can configure all of the different virtual switches for the virtualized ESX server. But note this. Remember I talked about configuring that trunk port group? This is the virtual ESX server. All the NICs that I would ever want to give it have to go to this trunk port group. Why? So that way I can use VLAN tags in the virtualized ESX server and learn and continue to be comfortable with VLAN tags and how those affect network communications. And once you do the configuration and you set up iSCSI in the virtualized ESX servers, you can go out and you can talk to the Synology-provided iSCSI or NFS data stores that exist on your network. So that way you can have a SAN, you can test HA, you can build 3 hypervisors on the same machine and actually see HA, DRS, failover, all those things can actually function and work for you in this all-built home lab. More importantly, build VMs on top of the virtualized ESXi servers. And in this configuration, they don't run as high-performance computing engines, but they run well. A normal install of Windows 2008, when I was doing the testing on this to figure out how long things took, I could do the install in 20 minutes on this environment. So running one of these as a VM took me 20 minutes to actually go through, thank you, pictures. Took about 20 minutes to install the environment and make that 2008 VM run on top of a virtualized ESXi that's running on a single shuttle PC. And one of the last videos that you'll see out on the YouTube channel is me going through the web interface and through the traditional vSphere client, and you'll see I'm calling out the physical machine, and then one of those is the virtual ESXi server, and how I'm sharing the same storage between them. Some really cool things you can do with that, and a lot of fun that you can do, you can have with this. Enjoy tech and being a nerd, because you're here with all of us and looking at this session. So you're looking to waste 2 or 3 weekends. Thank you. All right. So again, this is what we're talking about doing. I'm at that half-hour mark, just like I promised. And the best thing, the most important thing to remember, I don't care if you want to play with Hyper-V only. Put ESXi on the hardware itself. If you put on Hyper-V on the actual hardware and then build a Hyper-V that's virtualized, that's great, but you'll never be able to run a virtual machine inside that virtual hypervisor. You have to run ESX on the hardware, then you could run Hyper-V, which then Hyper-V could then run virtual machines. And when I mean virtual machines, 32 and 64-bit. So this is what I want you guys to go away with. Have a lot of fun. And how many people are actually going to try to build something like this? Yeah? I actually asked for more hardware so I could do this again. And all right, so I'm early. I'm going to stay here. Most important thing, everyone here really wants to win that thing downstairs. There's orange and yellow cards. If you don't fill them out, you can't get a chance to win. You have to be here today during the happy hour raffles to win. That's the only gotcha. So listen, I appreciate it. This is a big room. And one last thing, I want to do my own selfish thing, because I love getting a shot of a big room. Thank you guys for attending. This was great.